Now, when you were interviewed for your internal affairs investigation that you talked to Mr. Novotny about prior to the investigation, you had a union lawyer with you, right?
A 2-minute conversation forwarding information over a complaint that was being made. So I didn't have like you're saying, a conversation with him. It wasn't an interview. It was information being passed over. Less than a 2-minute conversation.
Okay. And you're a sworn law enforcement officer, right?
I was a sworn law enforcement officer, correct.
Okay. And is it any time during your policy and in training, is it good policy to allow a subject of an investigation to have a private conversation with the decision maker?
What do you mean the decision maker?
Well, for example, the person who's doing the investigation. Does the subject of the investigation get to have a private conversation with the person who's doing the investigation away from the police?
No.
No. Okay.
So basically what you're saying is I had a private conversation with Novotny, and all I did was sent the information over reporting the information that Lucky made a complaint against me, and I forwarded over less than a 2-minute conversation. So I'm having, what's the term that you lawyers use?
I couldn't say.
Oh, okay.
All right. So, and I want to be clear, when you were investigated by Internal Affairs, you weren't just represented by a union president, you had an actual attorney, right?
Yeah.
And that attorney was paid for by the union, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but so when Mr. Lucky was...
In which I pay into as well, counsel.
Okay. So did Mr. Lucky pay any dues anytime?
Yeah.
Okay. And in fact, he paid the dues that you refunded him for, right?
Yep.
Why did the union refund him 2 months worth of dues?
That's the 2 months that they said they wanted to sanction him. It seems like I'm getting background noise from somebody, so I don't know if somebody's giving me some feedback or something.
You're not the first person to complain of that.
Yeah, and I can't figure out where it's coming from.
It looks like somebody's having another conversation. That's what I'm saying, counsel. So I don't know if somebody having something.
You know what? It's really noisy next door to me. Can you give me a second and maybe I'll ask them to quiet down? I don't hear it, but maybe that's why I don't hear it.
Okay.
I lost my phone last night on my lawnmower, and I spent 5 hours looking for it. And then my son went to find my iPhone, and within 5 minutes we found it.
You probably should have went to him first.
That's what he said.
Is that better? Is the feedback on?
Yes.
We'll see. Great. Awesome. Okay. And so I'm asking you, did Mr. Lucky get union representation when he was being investigated for the sexual assault charges?
Yes, I believe he was. And then the attorneys, if I'm not mistaken, then the attorneys said it was a conflict, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Now, did you face any sanctions from the union for threatening to assault Mr. Lucky?
Nope.
No. How about for calling him any racial slurs?
Nope.
No. Okay. But as a result of that, after Mr. Lucky complained about that, Mr. Lucky representation from the union was removed and he was sanctioned, right?
Yep. The attorneys made that decision, not me.
So it's the board of the attorneys, which one?
The attorneys basically said they wasn't representing them because there's a conflict. And then the board also made the same recommendations, said the same thing.
retroactively, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, did anybody mention there being a conflict with you being represented because you had threatened to assault a union member?
Nobody said anything to me about it. No.
No. Okay. And did you face um, any criminal charges for threatening to assault Mr. Lucky?
No. No.
Why is that funny?
Because it was nothing criminal. He threatened me too. So, but nobody has that. But ironically, nobody has that recording.
Okay. So let's just take that assumption as true. What you're saying that isn't
It was
recorded.
true, counsel. Trust me, it was true.
I'll then let's go down that road. So what I'm asking you is, based on your experience as a law enforcement officer, wouldn't that constitute a crime?
Both parties, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then that leads me to another set of questions is, at that point, you were a sergeant, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Lucky is a officer, right? A deputy?
He's a deputy, yes.
Yeah. Supervising sergeants are generally held to a higher standard than deputies, right?
Yep.
Right, okay. And you had both employment power over Mr. Lucky at this time, right?
Employment power? What do you mean by that?
Well, you had through through your work, you had the ability to direct and control his job from time to time.
So to speak, yes.
Okay. You also had union power over Mr. Lucky at this time?
I mean, I don't know what you mean by union power, but yeah, I guess.
Well, for example, he got kicked out of the union, you didn't.
Yeah, I guess. If you have union power, yeah. I got union power.
Yeah, okay. And okay. And so you'll admit with me that you were not in the same position that Mr. Lucky was. You were not in equal positions, right?
To go back a little bit, when you said I had the union power, I have the power, but I don't have, like you're trying to perceive or portray it. I don't have the power to sign him where he's assigned or give him a job somewhere or something like that. So I guess, but I don't have the power like you're saying, like this is the ACA, not some other unions where I can assign them jobs and stuff like that. I don't have that type of power. No. So now you can go back and ask your question over again.
Thank you. Leaving that aside for a moment, we're talking about Mr. Lucky's representation and how valuable your representation is, generally speaking. Wasn't it a huge blow to Mr. Lucky's ability to defend himself, to have the union's representation withdrawn from him?
I did not take the union representation away from him. The board made the decision as well as the attorneys made the decision. I had nothing to do with that.
Okay.
But
whether or not
you guys may think I have it, but I don't. I don't have that type of power.
Okay.
That type of power.
So leaving that aside for a moment, I just want to direct you back to my question, which is not so much who made the decision, but whether that decision happened. So
the decision was made. The decision was made to withdraw from him.
Okay. And how many board members are white?
At the time, I believe at the time it was the board consists of 8 people. So, and then you had me, and then Bruno, and then all the rest was white, I believe.
Okay. So when you recused yourself, it was on an all-white board, right?
He had a Hispanic person on there as well.
Okay. So when you removed yourself, you removed the only black person from the board, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Which is
Which
also,
did
by
not-
the way, one of the reasons that you put Mr. Lucky into the court section, right? So he could have black supervisors, right?
No, that's not. No, that's not the only reason. He has more peers that'll be in the courts, more people that can be able to talk with him and help mentor him.
Got it. Okay. All right. So I think we're going to pause on this point in time here and go back further for go over the 0 for 7. So what is the first issue that you formally represented Mr. Lucky on with regards to the county?
I can't recall. I really can't recall that far back.
Okay. Well, do you recall Mr. Lucky making complaints about being assigned to a zone patrol? Sorry for racially imbalanced, being assigned to a zone patrol on a racially imbalanced basis. Do you recall him making those complaints?
Yes.
Okay. And that was about Mary Sawchuk, I believe, assigning him at that time?
Yes.
Okay. And he came to you as union president?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. What steps, if any, did you or Mr. Lucky take with regard to those allegations?
I went to the supervisor, which was Lieutenant Sawchuk at the time, and said, "Hey, what's going on with this incident?" She explained it. I went back to explain it to him.
Okay, that's like one of those one-on-one things?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And do you believe the discipline had already come down at that point?
I don't recall what happened in that matter.
Fair enough.
I
Do you
really don't.
recall what you explained to Mr. Lucky?
Pretty much said, "Hey," she said, because we didn't have a mitigation squad, I believe she said. And I explained it that they didn't have a mitigation squad. So they needed to have somebody leave out of sector 2. I'm old school, so you're going to hear me refer to as sectors instead of
Right.
zones. I say sectors. So it may have been where Lucky should have been in, 2 people should have been in sector 2, where they had to move somebody from sector 2 and move them over to sector 3 because of the construction that was in the area, if I'm not mistaken. And that happens on a rare occasion. And at that particular time, I believe staffing numbers were relatively low. I ain't gonna say relatively low, but they were lower than what they were what I had got set at. So he probably was in sector 2 by himself for a period of time, but he had other deputies or other squads. If he was tied up with something else, he could have called and say, "Hey, dispatch, can you have another squad back me up? Or could you have another squad go to that thing?" It's a simple fix. Very simple
And
fix.
do you know what time of year that was?
I do not know.
Could it have been in the winter?
Could have been in the wintertime, but like I said, I can't recall. It could have been in winter. It could have been that zone switch or that seasonal switch. I'm not for sure.
Okay. If it happened in the winter, are there generally more crashes in the winter?
There's more. Yes. There's more crashes in the winter.
Okay.
Winter,
So it would have been
there's
harder
more
to
crashes.
man
Spring
zone
and
2.
changes over. What's that again?
It would have been harder to man zone 2 with just one deputy in the winter, right?
With them being team players and everybody's supposed to be a team player, everybody comes in and helps out. Nobody's assigned. You're assigned to a sector, but if the cause of service is backed up, then they start sending other people to different sectors.
Okay. And when they investigated Mr. Lucky's complaints, right? They investigated his complaints about the zone.
I don't know who investigated. I don't know if it was internal affairs or HR, whoever he made the complaint to. Yeah.
Okay. Did you see those documents anytime?
Briefly, yes.
Okay. And my understanding is that there were allegations in there that other deputies felt that Mr. Lucky made too many complaints. Do you recall that?
I do not recall that at all. It could have been, but I don't recall it.
Okay. Well, let's just, you've had experience being the only black person on the patrol shift, right?
Yes.
Okay. And at that time, Mr. Lucky was also experiencing that condition, right?
Probably yes.
Okay. So, and you're saying team players, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, is that team players, does that apply to everybody all the time?
That's supposed to apply to everybody, but you know, it was comments that were made, you know, that people said he's not a team player.
What kind of people?
People on day shift, on his shift.
Okay, but and sorry, what I don't mean names. I mean like these officers,
Yes, those are deputies. Yes.
deputies. Vocabulary is important. I appreciate it. Did you ever hear that from a supervisor?
At that time I wasn't a supervisor at the time, so I stayed in, as they say, I stayed in my lane. I did my deputy role and I stayed in my deputy role.
Okay. But when Lucky was raising these issues about the patrols, you just confused me with your old school there. But
Sorry.
with the patrols, I'm struggling to learn this one as it is. When he's on those patrols, he's the only black deputy, and that you've overheard comments from white deputies saying he's not a team player, right?
Yes.
Okay, do
I've
you
heard
understand that to be race-based in any way?
I don't know if it was race based, but they said he wasn't a team player. So
Okay.
there was other stuff that he said. They said he stated at a roll call, if you don't help me, you don't have to help me. I don't want y'all at my scene anyway. So, you know, and I think that was in the reference of him not being a team player. But then I've heard other instances where deputies were, you know, he had come on the scene and he's in his sector and he's trying, you know, instead of them taking the information and taking the scene and taking the crash, that they say, well, Lucky, this is your sector. Here, you take your crash. So it was stuff like that. So I don't know if it was all race-based or if it was personality conflicts. It's hard for me to say if it was race-based because I know on that second shift, that didn't happen to me.
Okay.